Hello, my name is Juha Kotilainen. As a human geographer, I've been specializing in research into topics at the intersection of three research areas, including an examination of nature conservation and environmental protection, analysis of the use of natural resources, and investigation of the policies for regional and local development. The topic of this talk is politics of biodiversity. I am giving this presentation as a social scientist. Therefore, I will discuss how and why biodiversity is a social and political issue, not only a matter for the biological sciences to study. There are two main threads in this presentation. The first one of them is that the notion of biodiversity has become embedded in human societies. This is because the causes for the decline of biodiversity are societal with, for example, economic drivers for how humans interact with nature and their physical environment, thereby affecting also biological diversity. Moreover, the notion of biodiversity, as it is applied by societal actors, has impacts on human societies. Secondly, I will point out that in order to make sense of the politics of biodiversity, it is useful to understand human societies as consisting of institutions and actors, as they are important for conceiving of the successes and challenges of biodiversity conservation. So, while biodiversity, denoting variety in nature, is foundationally a concept of the natural sciences, as a concept it exists also in human societies. In other words, it can be argued that biodiversity as a discourse circulates in human societies. This means that we as members of our societies and epistemic and local communities talk and write about something we call biodiversity. Biodiversity is a notion that is used in policy making and in public discussions. Policymakers include it in the policy documents they prepare, and the press uses the notion too. A question therefore concerns the role of the discourse of biodiversity in human societies. Being applied by policymakers, decision makers, practitioners, experts in different fields, and the general public makes the practices concerning the conservation of biodiversity subject to interpretation and influence from a variety of societal interests. All this leads to biodiversity as a notion appearing in human societies, partly to lead a life of its own. This includes the term biodiversity itself, but also related notions such as rewilding that seek to have an impact on biological diversity. There are multiple societal actors who participate in influencing how the effects that the concept of biodiversity has in societies and natures turn out. The actors can be grouped as state actors and non-state actors, the latter including civil society actors and business actors. As they all contribute to the making of the politics of biodiversity, the notion of politics should therefore be seen as larger than just conventional party politics or policies implemented by state administrations. Moreover, the actors are organized across several spatial scales or levels of administration. State actors are central to the politics of biodiversity, as they are the ones who participate in international agreements. They also prepare legislations for protecting biodiversity. Furthermore, they regulate the actors whose actions have impacts on biodiversity. International organizations such as the Intergovernmental Platform for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, also known as IPBES, bring together state actors globally to design targets and measures for the protection of biodiversity. At the scales below the nation state, there are also regional and local administrations that have important roles in realizing action on the conservation of biodiversity. In addition to state actors, non-state actors have been important players in the politics of biodiversity. Civil society actors have been particularly important in biodiversity protection and the preceding species conservation since the mid-20th century. One of the most significant international organizations participating in the formulation of politics that led to the protection of threatened species has been the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, Iucn, which has a crucial civil society element. It has been a vital actor in preparing the red lists of threatened species and the CITES agreement. Non-state actors that have a role in the politics of biodiversity also include companies. Often such companies operate in the fields related to natural resource management. Companies are a central group of actors in the processes and practices of voluntary conservation measures. Civil society actors also have impacts through the influence that they are able to have on business actors. Forest certification and other forest protection measures are key elements in the voluntary dimension of biodiversity protection globally. Overall, the state and non-state actors tend to intermingle strongly in their efforts towards biodiversity conservation. It is commonplace to make a distinction between actors and institutions. Often institutions are understood as the rules that the actors in human societies follow and are constrained by, while at the same time the actors seek to mold the institutions to suit their needs. Institutions are sometimes divided into formal and informal institutions. The former are usually easier to change and include legislations. Institutions are important for the politics of biodiversity. An early agreement is the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, known as CITES. Since the early 1990s, a central institution in the field of biodiversity conservation has been the International Convention on Biological Diversity. The convention has proven to be a powerful international environmental agreement in that it has been popular amongst governments globally to ratify it. It is likely that this is a result of the agreement emphasizing the sustainable use of nature's resources that derive from diversity in nature, just as much as it aims to protect biological diversity as such. This leads to a question of whom does biodiversity benefit economically. Justice in sharing benefits is mentioned as one of the primary goals in the Convention on Biological Diversity. It is worthwhile noting that in the strategies for biodiversity conservation, it is not only biodiversity that is a target for the planned action. Typically, issues such as local or national economy or employment are goals in the policies. This is illustrated by the European Union's Biodiversity Strategy of 2020, which includes increasing employment as one of the goals of the strategy. However, the conventions and agreements that are made to guide the protection of biodiversity by human communities and societies are not the only form of rules that people follow. In addition, much of the action that people take is based on informal rules. This complicates reaching the goals for biodiversity conservation. Also, legislations play different roles in different societies. This impacts the efficiency of legislations in providing for solutions to the biodiversity crisis. We can assume that there is a large consensus within the scientific community on the severity of the biodiversity crisis. The existence of numerous species is threatened, and the diversity of ecosystems is waning. We do not see much arguments against these scientific findings today, not in the scientific literature nor in the public. Moreover, on a general level, several causes for the loss of biodiversity have been established, including such as habitat change, climate change, invasive species, overexploitation of natural resources, and pollution. Often these are related to land use change. While there seems to be a broadly accepted understanding on the extinction of species as a scientific fact and the decline in the variation of ecosystems, as well as the primary causes for these problems, there is much less established consensus on the societal and political means that should be employed to tackle the loss of species and ecosystem variety. On the one hand, in a very general sense, if one wishes to improve the protection of biodiversity, there are basically two different options to choose from. As a first option, one may wish to create stronger regulation by the state, which includes sanctioning those who do not comply with the regulations. As a second option, one may trust that relying on voluntary action is the best way forward. In the latter case, that operates through the markets for products, the consumers of a product are expected to affect the production process through their demands for responsibility from a producer. While this principle applies to a variety of environmental and social issues, biodiversity conservation was one of the early pathbreakers for the establishment of voluntary responsibility policies by companies. A different way to approach the means of biodiversity or species conservation is through the debates over the measures for the conservation and their impacts on different groups of actors. There is criticism in the research literature on the adverse impacts on local human communities from the enforcement of biodiversity conservation. These measures may be implemented by the state administrations, but also by non-state conservation organizations. The criticism points to coercive measures through which biodiversity conservation is enforced on local communities and people dependent on nature for their living. This criticism is at its sharpest regarding conservation actions that seek to realize conservation by setting up conservation areas as spaces where the actions by humans are to be limited, often decreasing the possibilities of previously existing human communities to continue with their livelihoods and lifestyles. Consequently, a suitable balance between the aims of conservation and the needs of human communities may provide the best outcomes for the conservation of biodiversity. In sum, what we know as biodiversity can be seen as crucially a societal and political issue in addition to its meanings in the field of the natural sciences. The discourse of biodiversity is linked with many different societal issues, including with economic and other values. It is probable that success in biodiversity conservation is to be reached best by accepting the existence of these societal and political dimensions of the discourse of biodiversity, along with the examination of the spatial distribution of biological diversity in nature.